Morning, everyone. This is Jim King with Friendship Sports, and we continue in our study of the book of Revelation. Today we are going to be in chapter 18. So if you have your Bibles, turn to Revelation chapter 18. Before we get started, I just want to make a quick reference to a series of things that are happening here. In chapter 17, we saw this picture being played out about the great harlot and the beast and what would be the one world religious system and the fall of that system. And now in chapter 18, we're going to continue with a picture of the beast and this other kingdom known as Babylon. And what is going to fall here is the financial part of the world. So there's reference to both kingdoms here in chapter 17 and 18, but know that one is about religion, 18 is about the economy. So let's start in verse 1. After these things I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. So, over a period of a short time, we don't know how many weeks or months that this system has been in place, and there's been crumblings happening, like there probably have been signs that this event could be happening, as is the case in most financial downturns in the world. We're going to read later on that the moment of its collapse is almost immediate, and oftentimes we're deceived in the world financially that the systems are much stronger than they really are. And so we could go into a lot of discussion about that. I'll save that for another time or another video. But at this time, what happens is, and the reason I bring this up is that it shows Babylon, that it has fallen. But there's all these things that are happening behind the scenes that are very important to bring up. So it says it has become a dwelling place of demons. So the whole financial system of the world, we're going to read later on that there's sorcery involved, and what has actually fallen and what was taking place within the financial markets before the great fall. But it says it's a prison for every foul spirit. So there's a very strong demonic presence within the money system, within the economy of the world. We'll get into a little bit later. And then it says a cage for every unclean and hated bird. Now, a lot of Bible scholars would point out that when we talk about the fowls of the air, the birds nesting in trees, or those kind of things, almost every time it is specific about demonic beings. And so, we could go into some of the parables that Jesus spoke of and the actual meaning of, what happens with abnormal growth and the birds of the air come to lodge in its branches, what that actually means in reference to these unclean and hated birds. Okay, so it seems like the system itself, before and during and even after the fall, is extremely demonic. And we're going to get into that a little bit because I don't know that we understand what we face in our own financial markets right now and how evil a lot of it is. Okay, verse 3, for all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. We read in 17 a very similar thing when we're talking about the religions of the world. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. So the world system, this economic power of the earth, and the kings of the earth, the leaders in government and other positions. It says they've committed fornication with her. They've been willing to commit adultery with her to gain huge amounts of wealth and riches. And literally in the end of verse 3, the abundance of her luxury talks about the strengths that they give to the people of the earth if they're willing to buy into the financial system. So there's bribery involved. There's all these powers to be behind the scenes that if the leaders will just allow them their place in the world system, that the leaders will get extremely wealthy. Verse 4, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues." Now this is a very interesting verse because many Bible scholars or many people of faith believe that the believers are going to have to go through the tribulation period all the way to the end. This verse here is basically saying, this voice in heaven is saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins." So even going into the 7-year tribulation, there is this desire by God that his people will not go through what is known as the sharing in their sins and the plagues that are being poured out. So I would say the argument would be that all the people that have faith in God, at some point that time is complete. This coming out of is very similar language to Thessalonians and earlier in Revelation, where there is a snatching away. Even John in chapter 1, where it talks about, his visions, and going into 2 and 3, where it says, "Come up here." And it's a similar reference. So it could be that there is a secondary rapture. I've mentioned that in the other chapters that we've gone through, where there seems to be a time of completeness. It could be the 144,000. It might be people who have put their faith in Jesus during the 7-year tribulation. But it seems like there is a time before what I would say is the bowl judgments, the plagues poured out, that there is a time of completeness, so that all the remaining people on the earth will not be followers of God or have their names written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Anyway, it says, "Come out of her," because God does not want them to receive the plagues or to share in the sins of this world financial system. "For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mix double for her. In the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow." So this is a very strong judgment against whatever is behind the financial evils that plague the world. And don't underestimate the evil that is behind the money system right now, currently. Okay, a lot of the things that are happening all over the world. Okay, I don't live all over the world. I live in the United States, and I study and follow what happens in the financial markets of the United States and the world. And really what's happening right now, you can't come to any other conclusion, is that it's just evil. And the idea behind it is total dominion. And, Satan is the great deceiver, and he's deceiving people to believe that if they get enough wealth, then somehow they can have all the power of the earth. We are reading here that behind all that is a deception, and ultimately God is going to win those battles and will have control and bring peace and harmony on the earth. The other system is not going to bring peace and harmony. It's going to bring death and complete destruction to people, because everybody is going to be going after the ultimate power through what the money can offer. Okay, so she is getting, meaning the world system here, whoever this she is, that is behind the money system, she is getting all these things repaid to her here. Now in verse 7, it talks about in the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow. That term actually means sensuality. It means sexual pleasure. It means all the things associated with this idea that nothing is going to happen to us even though we are sexually depraved in our minds. Okay, and that it's interesting that as you study and see some of the extremely wealthy, powerful people, that ultimately what happens is this bent towards sexual weirdness. I don't know how else to put it, but there's this depraved mindset that comes in, and all of a sudden they believe, we need to get weirder and weirder in our sexual preferences, and that sensuality is to be exalted as part of the money system of the world. So I think one of the things that's happening is, the proliferation of pornography, child pornography, the sex industry, and how it's almost championed, and it's just kind of the way things are. And the more advanced cultures get, the more money they spend in that. And I think there's a tie-in to this particular part here. Now it goes on to say, for she says in her heart, I sit as queen. I am no widow and will not see sorrow. So this idea, this deception, which is of the devil, is that we can live any way we want. We can acquire as much asset as we want. We can spend it on our own pleasures however we want, and there will be no sorrow. It will not end. One of the interesting things that my wife and I have seen and discovered is that things don't really satisfy us. I mean, there's good in some of these things. We enjoy the things around us, but it's not like we get to a point and we say, wow, that's enough. I don't need any more. There's always the next shiny thing, the next thing that's going to bring us some kind of freedom or joy, and actually we're busier than we've ever been, and do we actually get to enjoy the things that we like is a question. So there is this idea that the more we have, the more satisfied we might be, and that's not necessarily true, is it? Verse 8, therefore her plagues will come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges her. So the power of the financial system on the earth, and it is extremely powerful, is nothing compared to the power of God and the God who judges her for the sin that she commits with this money, and the kings of the earth that commit it with her. Verse 9, the kings of the earth who commit fornication and live luxuriously, sensually, remember, with her will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. Now you got to recognize they see what's happening in a moment, in a very short period of time. The financial, everything associated with value completely changes. Okay, so the kings of the earth that thought nothing it wouldn't end, they were going to have unlimited amounts of money and pleasure and sensual pleasures and all these kind of things. It's over. And look at the end of verse 10. For in 1 hour your judgment has come. They would realize, there is a realization during all this that God is bringing this judgment. Okay, that doesn't mean that they're going to stop what they're doing or not worship the beast anymore. It just means there is a recognition of what is behind this falling, this judgment. Verse 11, and the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. What is the merchandise that they weep over? What is the merchandise that people purchase and make these merchants wealthy through this financial system? And it's going to go through a list here. Merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple, silk and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon and incense, fragrant oil and frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots. And this is the one I want to concentrate on just for a minute. And the bodies and souls of men. So it listed alongside of all these other things of merchandise is the buying and selling of people. Now, one of the atrocities going on right now on the earth is the proliferation and incredible amount of human trafficking. The more we learn, the deeper it is. There's children and adults too taken into slavery and sold on the markets of the earth. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this. One of them is that tie into sensuality and sexuality and the depth of evil and vulgarity by some of the world leaders in the area of child pornography or pedophilia, and the selling, buying and selling and trading of human beings for the sensual pleasure of those with money and power. Okay, I think it's going to be exposed. There's no doubt about it. We're going to read about the exposure coming up. It may not be while we're on the earth. I don't know, but it's not like it's going to go on forever and not be judged. Okay, that's part of the deception of this economic system, is that, you know what, you're never going to get caught. You can be as vulgar as you want to be and nothing is ever going to happen. That is a lie of the devil, by the way. Okay, but included in these valuable resources and that are being bought and sold all over the earth, things that we would believe are valuable and part of what we buy and sell ourselves right now. It doesn't mean that they're all bad, but there's going to be a day when there is no value in those things. They become valueless. Okay, one of the beautiful things about heaven, we're told, is that, hey, you can come and eat whatever you want, drink whatever you want. It's all available to you in abundance, and it's not going to cost you anything. So this complete idea of abundance, that there is plenty for those in heaven, and you don't have to spend anything to get that. That's not true in our own culture on the earth right now. But there's going to be a time where the trades themselves, the merchants of the earth, the people who buy and sell goods and services, it's going to go away. And it's going to happen in a very, very short period of time. It says 1 hour. Okay, and the kings of the earth, the merchants of the earth are going to see it. But I wanted to make reference to this idea that, we think slavery is gone, or we get caught up in all these social justice issues, and the reality is that there's millions and millions of human life exterminated, put to death, sold, bought, and used upon the earth for the pleasures of money. Okay, we need to be honest about that. Verse 14, the fruit and the soul, the fruit that the soul longed for has gone from you, and all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you. Like they're gone. Where did they go? In other words, we place huge value on these things, that there is a a value placed on, let's say, an ounce of gold or a vehicle or, some goods or services that we buy or sell, and all of a sudden it's gone. It's completely vanished. Verse 15, the merchants of these things who became rich by her will stand at a distance for fear of her torments, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing, or has been laid to waste. In 1 hour, very short period of time, all the wealth of the earth, all of it, all the wealth of the earth, as far as goods and services go, come to nothing. Every shipmaster, all who traveled by ship, sailors, and as many as trade on the sea, stood at a distance and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What is like this great city? So there's going to be a place in the tribulation period that will become the financial center of the world. Okay, it's going to be known as Babylon, the great city. Okay, and the financial sector of the world, the banking powers of the world will be there, and it will be laid bare to waste. All of it. Verse 19, they threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing and saying, Alas, alas, that great city, in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. Now, verse 20 is an interesting response. Here we are back in this heavenly scene, and verse 20 says, Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you, holy apostles and prophets, or saints and prophets and saints and apostles, for God has avenged you on her. Now, that tie-in, now all of a sudden we see that this great financial system is very old. It has been around ever since the Old Testament times. And in my opinion, what it is, and Jesus talked about it, God warned about the Israelites about it, is this illusion of things, an illusion of wealth, and the potential joy that it brings to people. Now, temporarily it can bring happiness, but not eternal joy. Jesus taught to the woman at the well, you're going to dip your water jug in here and you're going to come up with water, and soon you'll be thirsty again. But all who drink from my cup will never thirst again. And it's interesting that I think that that's a tie-in to this great battle in the spiritual realm, where we do live under this illusion that we can seek after all these other things and find deep meaning, deep joy, deep satisfaction by attaining the things, the trinkets, the gold and precious stones, and all these things of the earth, and yet they're all temporal. So the thing that we should be seeking after the most in our lives and are willing to give up everything to get is this relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. It trumps everything and will bring us eternal joy and an unbelievable reality in heaven with God. Let's finish up chapter 18. We're in verse 21 here. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down, and shall be found not any more. The sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, and trumpeters shall not be heard in you any more. No craftsman or any craft shall be found in you any more, and the sound of a millstone grinding grain shall not be heard in you any more. The light of the lamp shall not shine in you any more, and the voice of bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you any more. For your merchants were the great men of the earth. So when we just read of the merchants, the ones that talked about the ships on the sea and the sailors on the sea, and how they wept over the loss of this financial system, it says here that they are the great men of the earth. Now, I personally believe that what this means is it is the elite. There is this group of men and women on the earth that are the bankers and the financial people of the earth. We probably have no idea who they are. Okay, they are the ones that control all of the financial things that happen on the earth, the great men of the earth. Okay, now it goes on to say, and this is later on in verse 23, for by your sorcery all the nations were deceived. Now that term sorcery has a lot of different meanings, okay, and we have to understand that this elite group, what's behind them is this sorcery. It is a demonic force. And if you look at one of the terms of sorcery, it's pharmakeia, or where we get pharmaceutical or pharmacy, and it talks about the drugs, both legal and illegal. As a matter of fact, I would say the majority of it would be considered legal pharmacy or legal drugs. And part of the sorcery of the earth and the financial system is tied into the drugs of the earth. And that's who's behind these decisions that bring huge money to this elite group of people. Now, don't take my word for it. Do research on your own. Okay, one of the things right now is there's a lot of discussions about foundations like the Bill Gates Foundation and things, and how they're behind the vaccinations of the earth and the drug manufacturing, the amount of incredible wealth that is behind some of these pharmacies. And I'm not condemning or condoning. I'm just saying, if you do your research, you're going to begin to see that some of these great world leaders, behind a lot of it is the marriage of money, power, and drugs. Okay, and it's going to be an interesting thing. But remember that whole system is going to fail. That whole system is going to fall. And it's not going to fall immediately. It's going to happen over a period of time, and it's going to build up, and everybody's going to be seduced and drawn into this deception, and then boom, it's over in a very short period of time. Verse 24, and in her was found the blood of prophets and saints and of all who were slain on the earth. Now, that's an interesting tie-in, and there's speculation about some things, but just let me close by saying that people who speak up against the truth of these things happening, they end up dead. And history is littered with many, many people who have died that question or come against this particular financial system, the powers to be behind the financial system. And so ultimately here at the end, what's being done here is because of the blood of prophets and saints and those who were slain on the earth because of this system. And we could, you could go into your own research about some of this and what it might mean, but we're talking about, abortion, the vast amounts of money made on abortion, and yet the end result is death to hundreds of millions of babies, and yet there's this system behind it, and the blood of those children are part of the reason that some of this is being poured out and is no more. You talk about the incredible amounts of wealth built on pharmaceutical companies and drugs, and how many hundreds of millions of people that have died because of drugs. And do they bring some good into people's lives to keep them alive? Absolutely, I'm not questioning that. But what is behind all of it is the the control of money and power, and even at the loss of human life, the goal is to get your money. Okay, so if you don't believe it, you haven't really studied medicine and what's happening in the legal system as far as what they can do to try to get your money. And so here's this falling. Chapter 17 was the fall of this religious system of the earth, and now we have the fall of the financial system. So God is systematically bringing judgment on the places of this earth that have been controlled and manipulated by our enemy, that is Satan. So that concludes chapter 18. Next time, we're going to get into chapter 19, and the events that John writes about here begin to change, and they go from the stage on earth, what is being viewed upon from earth, back to this time in heaven again, and what is happening in heaven, primarily in heaven. Okay, so read ahead, read chapter 19, and I look forward to seeing you. Thanks for joining.